The evening was calm, and the road stretched endlessly under the fading light of the sun. Keanu Reeves had been traveling for hours and felt the need to rest. He was not looking for anything fancy, just a simple place where he could sit quietly, enjoy a meal, and let his mind breathe away from the noise of Hollywood, cameras, and schedules. His eyes caught sight of a small roadside bar. It wasn't the kind of place that looked glamorous, but it carried a charm that promised warmth, food, and a quiet corner. He decided to step inside. The wooden door creaked as he entered, and a soft warmth welcomed him. The bar was modest, dimly lit, and filled with the smell of fried food mixed with old wood and faint music playing from a jukebox in the corner. A few locals sat scattered across tables, talking in low voices or sipping their drinks. The bartender, a middle-aged man with a kind face, looked up and gave Keanu a polite nod. Keanu, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, looked like any ordinary traveler passing by. He liked it that way. Fame had its heavy side, and in moments like this, he enjoyed blending into the background. He chose a quiet table near the corner, away from the main counter. The chair squeaked slightly as he sat down, and he placed his worn-out bag by his side. For a moment, he allowed himself to enjoy the peace. The sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter filled the space, but it was the kind of noise that felt human, not overwhelming. A waitress came over, smiling warmly, and took his order. He asked for something simple, a plate of food and water. His voice was calm, gentle, and polite, the kind of tone that immediately won respect without effort. As Keanu waited, he let his thoughts wander. Life had been full of ups and downs for him, but he had learned to find peace in the smallest places. He loved observing people, their stories told in the way they spoke, laughed, or even sat in silence. This bar, with its regulars, carried stories too. He could sense them in the way a couple whispered at a table near the jukebox, or the way a tired man leaned heavily over his drink at the counter. For a while, it felt like the perfect evening. But peace rarely lasts long when fate has other plans. The door suddenly banged open, slamming against the wall with a loud crack. The sound startled everyone inside. Heads turned quickly as a group of bikers entered, their heavy boots stomping against the floor. The noise of their arrival was louder than the music, louder than the laughter, and it immediately changed the atmosphere of the room. The regulars fell silent, their eyes dropping nervously to their tables. The bartender straightened, clearly uneasy, but said nothing. There were 5 of them, rough-looking men dressed in leather jackets, loud chains hanging from their belts. Their voices were brash, and their laughter carried an edge that didn't sound friendly. They walked with the kind of swagger that declared ownership of any place they entered. The biggest of them, a tall man with a beard that reached his chest, headed straight for the bar. He banged his hand on the counter and demanded drinks, his voice booming through the room. The others spread out, pulling chairs, knocking against tables without apology. A glass fell and shattered on the floor, but instead of picking it up, they laughed louder. It was the kind of laughter that unsettled people, laughter that felt more like a warning than joy. The bartender quickly served them, though his hands shook slightly. No one wanted trouble, but the presence of these men promised exactly that. Keanu observed quietly from his corner. His food had just arrived, and he calmly began to eat, pretending not to notice the commotion. But he noticed everything. He saw the way the bikers spoke down to the waitress, making her uncomfortable. He saw how one of them shoved a chair carelessly, nearly tripping an older man trying to pass. He saw the fear in the eyes of the regulars, who now avoided making any sound that might draw attention. The room that had felt so warm and safe only moments ago was now heavy with tension. Conversations had died. Even the jukebox seemed quieter, though its music still played. Keanu kept his composure, taking small bites of his food. He wasn't afraid, but he also wasn't eager to create a scene. He had always believed in patience, in letting situations cool before they boiled over. But the bikers were loud, and their arrogance grew with every passing minute. One of them, a man with tattoos running down his arms, glanced around the room as if searching for someone to bother. His eyes landed on Keanu, sitting alone in his quiet corner. Something about Keanu's calmness seemed to bother him. Perhaps he mistook silence for weakness, or maybe he simply wanted to amuse his friends with a new target. Whatever the reason, he nudged the man beside him and pointed toward Keanu. They both laughed, and slowly, like wolves circling prey, they began walking toward his table. The bar grew even quieter. All eyes shifted toward the corner where Keanu sat. The waitress froze in her tracks, and the bartender watched nervously, unsure of what to do. Keanu, sensing the shift, calmly placed his fork down. He lifted his eyes, meeting the gaze of the approaching men. His expression was neutral, neither afraid nor aggressive. The biker stopped at his table, towering over him. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he said loudly, drawing the attention of the entire room. "Sitting all by yourself, stranger? You look too clean for this place." His friends chuckled behind him. Keanu gave a small smile and replied softly, "Just having dinner. Nothing more." His voice was polite, but it carried weight. The biker didn't like it. He leaned closer, invading Keanu's space. "You think you're better than us, huh? Sitting in the corner like you own it." Keanu stayed calm, shaking his head gently. "No, just passing through. I don't want any trouble." But trouble was exactly what they wanted. The man slapped the table, making plates and glasses rattle. The sound echoed through the bar, and several people flinched. The biker's friends laughed again, louder this time, feeding on the tension. Keanu remained still, his hands resting calmly on the table. His body language was controlled, but his eyes were sharp. The air in the room grew thick. Everyone could feel something was about to happen, though no one could predict how. To the bikers, Keanu was just another quiet man, someone they could push around for fun. To everyone else in the room, he was a stranger whose patience seemed oddly unshakable. What they did not know, what none of them could have imagined, was that this quiet man carried with him a strength and discipline few people on earth possessed. He was calm now, but he was not weak. And as the night unfolded, the bikers were about to learn that the hard way. The tension in the bar grew heavier with every passing second. The bikers stood around Keanu's table, their shadows stretching across the floor. Their laughter carried no warmth, only arrogance. The customers who had once been enjoying their meals and drinks now sat frozen, pretending to look elsewhere, though their eyes flickered back nervously. Everyone knew trouble was brewing, but no one dared to interfere. Keanu remained calm, his hands resting loosely on the table. His plate of food was still in front of him, but he had stopped eating. The man towering over him smirked, enjoying the uneasy silence of the room. "Look at this guy," he said loudly, pointing at Keanu as if he were an exhibit. "Sitting here all alone, acting like he's too good to join the rest of us." His friends chuckled, egging him on. One of them leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough for Keanu to hear. "You lost, buddy? Maybe you wandered into the wrong bar." His tone was mocking, daring Keanu to answer. Keanu's eyes remained steady, his expression calm. He spoke in a voice so soft yet clear that everyone near him could hear. "I'm just passing through. I only stopped here to eat. I don't want any trouble." His politeness, however, was mistaken for weakness. The bikers weren't looking for peace. They thrived on intimidation, on pushing others until they broke. The leader of the group, the tall man with the thick beard, slammed his hand on Keanu's table again, making the glasses shake. "Trouble," he repeated with a laugh. "You're already in trouble, my friend." The sound of forced laughter followed, and some of the men at nearby tables looked down quickly, hoping not to be noticed. The bartender's face was pale, his hands gripping the counter. He had seen fights before, but something about this situation felt different. He wanted to say something, but the fear of provoking the bikers held him back. The waitress who had served Keanu earlier stood near the kitchen door, her tray pressed tightly to her chest. She looked worried, not only for Keanu but for the entire bar. These men had come in like a storm, and if things got out of control, no one would be safe. The bikers began circling the table, their boots echoing on the wooden floor. One of them pulled out a chair and sat across from Keanu without asking, leaning forward with a smirk. "You look familiar," he said, tilting his head. "But I can't quite place it. You some kind of big shot?" Keanu simply shook his head. "No, just a traveler." The biker laughed, slapping his knee. "A traveler? Hear that, boys? Our friend here is just a traveler. Maybe he's lost. Maybe he needs some directions." His words were laced with sarcasm, and his friends howled with amusement. Keanu didn't respond to the mockery. He picked up his glass of water, took a sip, and placed it back down gently. His silence irritated them even more. To the bikers, silence was defiance. They wanted noise, fear, and reaction. Instead, they were faced with calmness that unsettled them. Another biker stepped closer and jabbed a finger at Keanu's shoulder. "Say something tough," he sneered. "Show us you're not afraid." Keanu looked at him for a long moment before replying in the same steady tone, "I'm not afraid. But I don't see a reason to fight you." The room was silent again, every ear tuned to his words. The bikers exchanged glances, confused by his refusal to rise to their bait. Normally, by now, their target would be angry or begging them to stop. But this man, he was different. Their leader narrowed his eyes. "You think you're smarter than us, don't you? Sitting there, talking calm, like you're above all this." He leaned in closer, his beard nearly brushing the table. "Let me tell you something. This is our place. And when we walk in, we decide what happens." Keanu's gaze didn't waver. His calmness was almost unsettling, even to the man trying to intimidate him. He spoke again, softer this time. "Then you should decide something better." The words, though gentle, carried weight. They made the leader's jaw tighten. His pride, already stretched thin, couldn't take being challenged in front of his group. He stood up straight, puffing his chest like a predator ready to strike. The air felt sharp, every second stretching like an eternity. The other bikers sensed their leader's growing anger and began surrounding Keanu even tighter, closing off his space. One of them pushed the chair next to him, scraping it across the floor with a screech. Another picked up a salt shaker from the table and tossed it aside, watching it roll across the wooden floorboards. Their actions were small, but they carried a clear message: they were closing in, waiting for the moment to strike. The people in the bar sat frozen, their breaths shallow. No one dared to move, afraid that even the smallest sound might spark the fight that was waiting to happen. The bartender's hand twitched toward the phone beneath the counter, but he hesitated. Calling the police might help, but by the time they arrived, it could be too late. Keanu leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes sweeping calmly over the men around him. He wasn't panicked. If anything, he looked like someone carefully reading a situation, calculating every move, every angle, every distance. But to the bikers, it seemed like arrogance. "Stand up," one of them ordered, his voice rough. "Let's see what kind of man you are when you're not sitting down." The demand echoed through the room. Keanu didn't move right away. Instead, he took another slow breath, as though he was giving them one last chance to step back. Then, finally, he pushed his chair back and rose to his feet. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the floor made the room even more silent. Standing, Keanu seemed taller, more solid, more present. He wasn't the type of man who needed to puff out his chest or shout to prove himself. His presence alone carried strength. The bikers noticed it too, though they tried to hide their unease behind mocking smiles. "Look at him," one of them jeered. "He thinks he's some kind of hero." But in that moment, the bar's customers could see something the bikers couldn't. There was something different about this quiet stranger. He wasn't just another man to push around. There was a steadiness in his posture, a focus in his eyes, that hinted at something far beyond ordinary. The leader stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. "You made a mistake coming here tonight." Keanu tilted his head slightly, his voice steady. "Maybe. Or maybe you did." The words hung in the air like a spark waiting for fuel. The bikers laughed, but their laughter sounded thinner now, less certain. The balance in the room was shifting, though they hadn't realized it yet. To them, it was still a game, still a chance to show their dominance. To Keanu, it was a test of patience, a patience that was nearing its end. The night that had started as a simple stop for food was no longer simple. The quiet man in the corner was no longer unnoticed. And the bikers, in their arrogance, were walking straight into a lesson they would never forget. The bar was so quiet that even the faint hum of the jukebox seemed distant. Every eye was fixed on the corner where Keanu stood, surrounded by the bikers. His chair sat pushed back behind him, and his plate of food was forgotten. What had begun as teasing and mocking had now turned into a dangerous standoff. The leader of the group stared at him with narrowed eyes, his pride unwilling to let a quiet stranger walk away unchallenged. The tall biker leaned closer, his beard brushing against his jacket as he spoke. "I don't think you understand where you are. This is our place. You don't just sit here, eat your food, and act like nothing's happening." Keanu's eyes stayed calm, steady as stone. His voice was even softer than before. "I understand. I just don't see a reason for this." His words, polite as they were, did nothing to ease the tension. The bikers didn't want reason. They wanted to humiliate, to force a reaction, to prove their power in front of the crowd. One of them stepped forward and shoved Keanu's shoulder. It wasn't a light push, it carried weight, meant to test him. The bar gasped as Keanu's body shifted slightly from the impact. But instead of reacting with anger, he simply adjusted his balance and straightened again. His eyes met the bikers, calm as ever. That calmness made the men angrier. They wanted him to flinch, to argue, to fight back in desperation. Instead, they were staring at a man whose patience felt unshakable. "You got nothing to say," the biker sneered. "Come on, tough guy, show us something." He shoved again, harder this time. The sound of boots scraping against the wooden floor echoed through the room. Keanu raised a hand slightly, not to strike, but to make a gentle gesture. "Enough," he said quietly. The leader laughed bitterly. "Enough? Oh, it's just getting started." With that, another biker, the one with tattoos running down his arms, leaned in close, his face twisted in mock anger. "Let's see how long you can stay calm." He reached over and tipped Keanu's glass of water onto the floor, letting the liquid spill across the wood. The crowd in the bar shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, unable to watch. Others leaned forward, sensing the moment was about to break. The bartender's hand was still frozen under the counter, hovering near the phone, but he didn't dare move. Keanu looked down at the spilled water for a moment, then back up at the men. His face remained steady, but his patience was wearing thin. His eyes, usually warm and gentle, carried a sharper edge now, though the bikers were too blind with arrogance to notice. The leader leaned closer, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "You've got one choice. You either stand up for yourself, or we'll make sure you regret ever walking in here." For the first time, Keanu's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't humor. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing something others don't. The leader frowned. "What's so funny?" Keanu's voice was calm, but it carried a firmness that hadn't been there before. "You think I'm afraid? I'm not. But I've been patient. Don't mistake that for weakness." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and sharp. The bikers blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. The people in the bar sat frozen, barely breathing. Something was changing, though the bikers were too caught up in their pride to see it. One of them, frustrated by the stillness, decided to break it. With a grunt, he swung his arm, aiming a punch at Keanu's chest. It was a sudden, reckless move meant to provoke. But Keanu moved before the fist could land. His body shifted with such speed and control that it stunned everyone watching. In one smooth motion, he stepped aside, letting the biker's momentum carry him forward. The man stumbled past, nearly colliding with the edge of the table. The crowd gasped. Keanu didn't hit him. He didn't strike back. He had simply avoided the blow with precision that looked almost effortless. The biker regained his balance and turned, his face red with anger and embarrassment. His friends laughed at first, but not the same kind of laughter as before. This time it carried nervousness. For the first time, they had seen something unusual in this quiet man. The leader stepped forward, glaring. "So you do know how to move," he said, his tone darker now. "Guess we'll have to push harder." The bikers tightened their circle around Keanu. The customers held their breaths, eyes darting between the men and the door. The waitress clutched her tray, her knuckles white. The bartender whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer, wishing for the storm to pass. Keanu's voice came again, quiet but strong. "This is your last chance. Walk away." His words weren't loud, but they carried authority that none of them expected. It was the kind of voice that didn't ask, it warned. But arrogance is a blinding thing. The bikers didn't listen. One of them grabbed Keanu's jacket, pulling him forward. "Or what?" he spat. "You gonna stop us?" The bar went completely silent. Everyone's heart seemed to stop at once. The moment had arrived, the one they had all been dreading and anticipating. Keanu looked down at the hand gripping his jacket, then back up at the man's face. His eyes were sharper now, no longer hiding the strength behind his calm exterior. For the first time, the bikers caught a glimpse of something they couldn't explain, something dangerous, controlled, and precise. And though the fight hadn't truly begun yet, everyone in the bar could feel it coming like a storm rolling over the horizon. The bikers thought they had cornered an ordinary man. But what they didn't realize was that they had just poked the wrong bear. The calm, quiet stranger was not ordinary at all. And in a matter of moments, their laughter would be replaced with shock, fear, and the realization that they had chosen the wrong person to provoke. The bar was so quiet that even the faint hum of the jukebox seemed distant. Every eye was fixed on the corner where Keanu stood, surrounded by the bikers. His chair sat pushed back behind him, and his plate of food was forgotten. What had begun as teasing and mocking had now turned into a dangerous standoff. The leader of the group stared at him with narrowed eyes, his pride unwilling to let a quiet stranger walk away unchallenged. The tall biker leaned closer, his beard brushing against his jacket as he spoke. "I don't think you understand where you are. This is our place. You don't just sit here, eat your food, and act like nothing's happening." Keanu's eyes stayed calm, steady as stone. His voice was even softer than before. "I understand. I just don't see a reason for this." His words, polite as they were, did nothing to ease the tension. The bikers didn't want reason. They wanted to humiliate, to force a reaction, to prove their power in front of the crowd. One of them stepped forward and shoved Keanu's shoulder. It wasn't a light push, it carried weight, meant to test him. The bar gasped as Keanu's body shifted slightly from the impact. But instead of reacting with anger, he simply adjusted his balance and straightened again. His eyes met the bikers, calm as ever. That calmness made the men angrier. They wanted him to flinch, to argue, to fight back in desperation. Instead, they were staring at a man whose patience felt unshakable. "You got nothing to say," the biker sneered. "Come on, tough guy, show us something." He shoved again, harder this time. The sound of boots scraping against the wooden floor echoed through the room. Keanu raised a hand slightly, not to strike, but to make a gentle gesture. Enough, he said quietly. The leader laughed bitterly. Enough? Oh, it's just getting started. With that, another biker, the one with tattoos running down his arms, leaned in close, his face twisted in mock anger. Let's see how long you can stay calm. He reached over and tipped Keanu's glass of water onto the floor, letting the liquid spill across the wood. The crowd in the bar shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, unable to watch. Others leaned forward, sensing the moment was about to break. The bartender's hand was still frozen under the counter, hovering near the phone, but he didn't dare move. Keanu looked down at the spilled water for a moment, then back up at the men. His face remained steady, but his patience was wearing thin. His eyes, usually warm and gentle, carried a sharper edge now, though the bikers were too blind with arrogance to notice. The leader leaned closer, his voice low but sharp as a blade. You've got one choice. You either stand up for yourself, or we'll make sure you regret ever walking in here. For the first time, Keanu's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't humor. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing something others don't. The leader frowned. What's so funny? Keanu's voice was calm, but it carried a firmness that hadn't been there before. You think I'm afraid? I'm not. But I've been patient. Don't mistake that for weakness. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and sharp. The bikers blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. The people in the bar sat frozen, barely breathing. Something was changing, though the bikers were too caught up in their pride to see it. One of them, frustrated by the stillness, decided to break it. With a grunt, he swung his arm, aiming a punch at Keanu's chest. It was a sudden, reckless move meant to provoke. But Keanu moved before the fist could land. His body shifted with such speed and control that it stunned everyone watching. In one smooth motion, he stepped aside, letting the biker's momentum carry him forward. The man stumbled past, nearly colliding with the edge of the table. The crowd gasped. Keanu didn't hit him. He didn't strike back. He had simply avoided the blow with precision that looked almost effortless. The biker regained his balance and turned, his face red with anger and embarrassment. His friends laughed at first, but not the same kind of laughter as before. This time it carried nervousness. For the first time, they had seen something unusual in this quiet man. The leader stepped forward, glaring. So you do know how to move, he said, his tone darker now. Guess we'll have to push harder. The bikers tightened their circle around Keanu. The customers held their breaths, eyes darting between the men and the door. The waitress clutched her tray, her knuckles white. The bartender whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer, wishing for the storm to pass. Keanu's voice came again, quiet but strong. This is your last chance. Walk away. His words weren't loud, but they carried authority that none of them expected. It was the kind of voice that didn't ask, it warned. But arrogance is a blinding thing. The bikers didn't listen. One of them grabbed Keanu's jacket, pulling him forward. Or what? He spat. You gonna stop us? The bar went completely silent. Everyone's heart seemed to stop at once. The moment had arrived, the one they had all been dreading and anticipating. Keanu looked down at the hand gripping his jacket, then back up at the man's face. His eyes were sharper now, no longer hiding the strength behind his calm exterior. For the first time, the bikers caught a glimpse of something they couldn't explain, something dangerous, controlled, and precise. And though the fight hadn't truly begun yet, everyone in the bar could feel it coming like a storm rolling over the horizon. The bikers thought they had cornered an ordinary man. But what they didn't realize was that they had just poked the wrong bear. The calm, quiet stranger was not ordinary at all. And in a matter of moments, their laughter would be replaced with shock, fear, and the realization that they had chosen the wrong person to provoke. The bar seemed to hold its breath. Everyone waited, frozen, as if time itself had stopped. The biker's hand was still gripping Keanu's jacket, knuckles tight, his face twisted with arrogance. Around him, his friends smirked and leaned closer, eager to see their leader put the quiet man in his place. But what they did not realize was that the game had just shifted. Keanu looked down at the biker's hand, then slowly raised his eyes. His calm gaze carried no panic, no fear. Instead, it carried a quiet warning. He spoke softly, almost like a whisper. "Let go." The biker laughed. "Or what?" he mocked, giving Keanu's jacket a sharp tug. The rest of the group laughed too, the sound echoing across the silent room. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Keanu's hand moved with lightning speed. In one smooth motion, he gripped the biker's wrist, twisted it gently but firmly, and freed himself from the hold. The biker cried out in surprise, stumbling backward, clutching his arm. It wasn't a violent move, it was precise, controlled, and enough to show that Keanu was not the man they thought he was. The bar erupted with gasps. The customers who had been silent now sat wide-eyed, barely believing what they saw. The biker who had been thrown off balance scrambled to his feet, his pride wounded more than his body. His face turned red with rage. "You think you're clever," he shouted, lunging forward. But Keanu was ready. The biker swung a wild punch, but Keanu stepped aside, letting the fist cut through empty air. With a simple movement, Keanu guided the biker forward, sending him stumbling into a chair that collapsed beneath his weight. The sound of splintering wood filled the room. The other bikers jumped up, no longer laughing. Their eyes were wide now, their smirks fading into something else, confusion, maybe even doubt. For the first time, they saw that the man they had mocked wasn't weak at all. Still, arrogance wouldn't let them back down. One of them roared, charging at Keanu with both hands outstretched. The bar watched as Keanu moved again, swift and controlled. He ducked slightly, turned his body, and guided the man past him, sending him sliding across the bar counter. Glasses rattled, and the bartender quickly pulled back, nearly spilling the drinks he had lined up. The crowd gasped again, some even letting out nervous laughter, as if they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. It was like a scene from a movie, only it was real, happening right in front of them. The leader, beard bristling with anger, barked at his friends. "Stop messing around! Take him down!" 3 bikers rushed at Keanu at once, their heavy boots pounding against the wooden floor. But Keanu didn't flinch. His movements were fluid, like water flowing around rocks in a stream. One biker swung a fist, but Keanu leaned back just enough to let it pass. Another tried to grab him, but Keanu shifted his weight, stepping aside so the 2 men collided with each other instead. The bar echoed with the sound of bodies hitting tables and chairs crashing to the floor. The customers, though afraid, couldn't help but watch in awe. Some covered their mouths in shock, while others whispered to each other in disbelief. The waitress who had been standing near the kitchen door stared with wide eyes, clutching her tray so tightly her hands trembled. She had expected chaos, but not like this. The quiet man she had served food to was moving like someone trained, someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Another biker lunged forward, swinging recklessly. This time, Keanu blocked the strike with his arm, then gave a gentle push that sent the man staggering back into a table. Drinks spilled, and the sound of breaking glass filled the room. The biker groaned, sliding to the floor. The leader growled, his face twisted in fury. He stomped forward, towering over Keanu. "You think you're tough? You think you can walk in here and make fools out of us?" Keanu stood tall, his voice calm but steady. "I told you. I didn't want trouble. But you wouldn't stop." The leader roared and threw a punch, his fist flying toward Keanu's face. The room gasped, but Keanu's reflexes were faster. He tilted his head just enough for the punch to miss, then stepped in close. With a controlled movement, he placed his hand against the man's chest and pushed him backward. The leader stumbled, crashing into the table behind him, knocking over plates and drinks. The bar erupted with noise, gasps, murmurs, and even a few cheers from the braver customers. They were witnessing something incredible, something no one would have believed if they weren't there to see it. The bikers, now groaning and scattered across the floor, began to realize the truth. This wasn't an ordinary man. His calmness wasn't weakness, it was strength, strength they had completely underestimated. The leader got back to his feet, his chest rising and falling with anger. His eyes burned as he glared at Keanu. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice raw. Keanu's expression remained unchanged. "Just someone who wanted to eat in peace." The words carried weight, settling over the room like a heavy blanket. The customers exchanged glances, some whispering. They knew who he was. They recognized the face, the voice, the movements. And though the bikers hadn't realized it yet, the truth was starting to dawn on the rest of the bar. One customer whispered to another, "That's him. That's Keanu Reeves." Another gasped, her hand covering her mouth. No wonder he moves like that." The bikers, still too caught up in their pride, hadn't made the connection. To them, he was still just a stranger, though now one with skills they couldn't explain. The leader clenched his fists, preparing for another attack. But this time, his steps were slower, more cautious. He had felt the strength behind Keanu's movements, seen the precision in his reactions. Deep down, he knew this wasn't going to end the way he had planned. Keanu, standing calmly, gave him one last chance. His voice was quiet but firm. "Walk away. Now." The leader hesitated, his pride battling against the clear reality in front of him. Around him, his friends groaned and staggered, some clutching their sides, others trying to catch their breath. The fight had been short, but it had been enough to show that none of them stood a chance. The bar waited, every eye on the leader. Would he keep fighting, or would he finally see reason? His pride wouldn't let him back down so easily. With a growl, he lunged again, swinging wildly. But Keanu moved like a shadow, stepping aside, then gently guiding the man forward until he stumbled and fell to his knees. The bar went silent again. The leader, on the floor, breathed heavily, his anger drained by exhaustion and defeat. His friends looked at him, then at Keanu, their faces pale. In that moment, the truth settled over them all. This wasn't just a quiet man. This wasn't just a traveler. This was someone far more dangerous than they could have imagined. And though they didn't know his name yet, they understood one thing clearly: they had made a mistake. The bar was silent except for the sound of heavy breathing and the faint hum of the jukebox still playing in the corner. Chairs lay overturned, glasses shattered, and a few tables leaned at awkward angles from the struggle. The bikers who had once entered with such arrogance now sat scattered on the floor, bruised in pride more than in body, staring at the quiet man they had thought was weak. Keanu stood calmly in the middle of it all. His breathing was steady, his jacket still neatly in place, his posture relaxed as if nothing extraordinary had happened. His eyes swept the room, checking not on the men who had attacked him, but on the other people in the bar. His concern wasn't for himself, he wanted to see if anyone else had been hurt. The waitress, who had been frozen near the kitchen door, slowly lowered her tray. Her eyes were wide, filled with disbelief. The bartender, who had held his breath through the entire fight, finally exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. A couple sitting near the jukebox whispered to each other, one of them pointing toward Keanu with shaking hands. The leader of the bikers, still on his knees, glared up at Keanu. His beard was damp with sweat, and his chest rose and fell quickly. He wanted to shout, to curse, to stand up and fight again, but he couldn't. Deep down, he knew the truth. No matter how many times he tried, he would never win against this man. "Get up," one of his friends muttered, helping him to his feet. But when he tried to take a step forward, his legs trembled. He looked at Keanu again, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. There was only the sharp sting of respect, though he would never admit it out loud. Keanu spoke softly, his voice steady as ever. It doesn't have to go further. Leave. Go home. The bikers exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. Their pride told them to stay, but their instincts screamed to walk away. One by one, they began to step back, their boots heavy on the wooden floor. The leader hesitated the longest, his fists clenched at his sides, but even he couldn't deny the truth. With a frustrated growl, he finally turned toward the door. His men followed, limping, grumbling, and holding their bruises. The bar remained quiet as the heavy door creaked open. The night air rushed in, carrying away some of the tension that had hung in the room. When the door shut again, the silence was broken only by the sound of relieved sighs. For a moment, no one moved. The customers stared at Keanu as if they weren't sure what they had just witnessed. Slowly, the whispers began. That was unbelievable, did you see how fast he moved? He didn't even look scared. The waitress stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Sir, are you all right? Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. I'm fine. Thank you. She nodded quickly, still staring at him as though he were someone out of a story. The bartender came out from behind the counter, shaking his head in amazement. I've run this place for 20 years, he said slowly, and I've seen my share of trouble. But I've never seen anything like that. Keanu gave a modest shrug. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted dinner. That simple answer made a few people chuckle nervously, the tension in the room finally beginning to fade. Then, one man near the back of the bar leaned forward, squinting at Keanu. Wait a second, he whispered. I know that face. I've seen him before. His companion frowned. Where? The man's eyes widened suddenly. Movies. That's Keanu Reeves. The words spread like wildfire through the room. Keanu Reeves, someone repeated. No way. Another leaned closer, studying him carefully. It is him. Look at him. That's him. The guy from John Wick. A hush fell again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was awe. People began to murmur, some smiling, some gasping. The waitress covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes sparkling with surprise. Keanu, however, didn't react. He didn't confirm or deny it. He simply stood there, his expression calm, as though none of this mattered. Fame was never something he flaunted. He preferred to remain humble, even when the entire room now buzzed with excitement. The bartender finally broke the silence. John Wick himself, in my bar. He chuckled, shaking his head. And those bikers had no idea. A ripple of laughter spread across the room, the tension fully dissolving at last. The customers, who had been stiff with fear only minutes earlier, now smiled, their shoulders relaxing. They felt as though they had witnessed something special, a story they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Keanu walked back to his table, calmly picking up his chair and setting it upright. He adjusted his plate, though most of his food had gone cold. Still, he sat down, as if the night were nothing unusual. The waitress rushed over. Let me bring you a fresh plate, she insisted. Keanu gave her a kind nod. Thank you. That would be nice. As she hurried off, a few of the braver customers approached him. One man, still trembling from the adrenaline of watching the fight, said, Mr. Reeves, I just want to say, that was incredible. You handled them without even losing your temper. Keanu smiled politely. Violence isn't the answer. But sometimes, you have to protect yourself and others. That's all it was. His humility only deepened the admiration in the room. People nodded, whispering to one another about how different he was from the usual celebrities they had heard about. He wasn't arrogant, he wasn't proud. He was simply kind, patient, and strong when needed. The waitress returned with a fresh plate of food, her hands steady now. She set it down gently in front of him. It's on the house, she said firmly. Keanu looked at her, his eyes warm. You don't have to do that. I want to, she replied with a smile. You protected all of us tonight. He gave her a gentle nod of thanks and began to eat quietly, as though nothing unusual had happened. Around him, the bar slowly came back to life. Conversations restarted, the jukebox played louder, and people laughed again. The shadow of fear had been lifted. As the night went on, some customers left, still buzzing with excitement, while others stayed just to be in the same room as him. The story was already spreading. Someone was surely texting their friends, someone else might even be posting about it online. By the next day, the tale of what happened in that small roadside bar would no longer be a secret. But Keanu didn't think about any of that. For him, it had simply been another stop on a long road, another quiet evening turned complicated. He finished his meal, thanked the staff, and paid his bill generously despite their insistence it was free. Then, with his bag over his shoulder, he walked toward the door. As he stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against his face. The stars twinkled above, and the road stretched ahead into the darkness. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, then walked on quietly, leaving the bar behind. Inside, the customers were still buzzing, retelling the story to each other, their voices filled with awe. They knew they had just witnessed something rare. Not only had they seen a famous actor in real life, but they had also seen the strength and humility that made him truly remarkable. For the bikers, the night would be remembered differently. They would never forget the quiet man they had mocked, the man who had shown them strength without cruelty, discipline without arrogance. They had walked into the bar thinking they were in control. They had left with a lesson they would carry for a lifetime. And for everyone else, the story would become legend. The night when abusive bikers attacked a stranger in a small bar, only to discover too late that the stranger was Keanu Reeves, the man known to the world as John Wick.